Hi everyone, thanks for sticking around to see me in the final session of the day. I'm Kate Wilson. I'm Research Director and Deputy GM here at RFI Group. And what I'm going to end the day with is just a couple of our insights from our most recent Mortgage Council survey, looking at in particular first home buyer segments. So I know we've spoken about lots of other areas of the market during the day, but wanted to finish up with some insights around what we're seeing in terms of first home buyers. So we know there's a lot changing in the market in terms of customer demand. I'll touch on that a little bit in terms of what we're seeing from our data, and in particular what we're seeing around intent to enter the market. And then I want to talk about how the opportunities that exist around supporting first home buyers to enter the market. And then looking at, once you've acquired first home buyers, how can you turn them into longer term customers? So talking about loyalty and retention as well as acquisition. For those of you who haven't seen any of our Mortgage Council research before, this is a study we run 4 times a year, talking to 2,000 borrowers and really reflecting on their experience going through the mortgage application process. I'll really be focusing in on how that process looks and what those experiences are like for the first home buyer segment. But starting off with how we're seeing customer demand change, and we know that the market has really heated up post-pandemic and through 2020. We're seeing that in our data as well. So when we look at proportion of all consumers are intending to take out a mortgage in the next 12 months, we see that that has actually gone up throughout 2020. This is a stat that we're watching really closely, in particular during the first months of the pandemic last year. If you look at how mortgage uptake intention has changed through the second half of 2020 in particular, we really have seen a lot of increasing demand in the market, in particular, increasing demand for owner-occupier mortgages. We see that in publicly available data as well. So ABS also points to the heat that's in the market, and in particular proportion of customers that are first home buyers. So I know within the conference, we'll be talking a lot about refinancing and all the activity we're seeing in the refinancing market, but first home buyers also a really important segment at the moment, and increasingly a larger segment of applications as well. It's around 1 in 4 borrowers at the moment qualifying as or being first home buyers. The other one I wanted to touch on was just around how customers are thinking about mortgages from a savings perspective. So when we look at savers in our data, we also do see an uptick in terms of proportion of customers who say that they are saving towards a house deposit, or their largest savings goal, the most important savings goal is for a house deposit. You can also see here there's been a couple of other changes in the market. Probably the one that's maybe a little bit surprising is we haven't really seen travel drop off too significantly, at least just yet in our data. But of course, we know that as customers aren't traveling to the same extent, there is additional money there that perhaps they are thinking about using in other ways. The other point here is just if we talk about that younger customer group, so in particular customers who are under the age of 35, we've consistently seen in our data over time that saving for a house deposit is a #1 goal for those customers. Currently, around 1 in 5 savers under the age of 35 are saving towards their house deposit, and that has also been increasing over the last couple of years. So while there are a number of pressures that are on that younger customer segment, and we know that they have been hardest hit by the pandemic because they're more likely to be in part-time or casual work, they're more likely to be working in the hospitality industry. They are still looking to save for their first home, saving for a house deposit, and potentially there's opportunity there, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the next section actually, but opportunity to help those customers into their first home. So where can we support customers to a greater extent, and where is that support going to be most relevant for a first home buyer? What we've looked at in our mortgage research, so this is customers reflecting on their experience going through the home loan journey. There are a couple of points in the process where borrowers are more likely to consider that part of the application to be difficult. So you can take from that more likely to need help. But in particular, first home buyer is significantly more likely to consider different stages of the application journey to be difficult. And potentially not surprising to those of you dialed in today that first home buyers would consider parts of the application process more difficult than other segments. This is obviously the first time they're going through this process. They're less savvy than someone like a refinance or an upgrader or a downgrader who've been through this process before. So it does point to them needing more help. What is interesting is where we see that help being needed. So if we look at where customers are considering the process to be most difficult for first home buyers, it's really when they're saving for a deposit. So going back to that previous slide, we know that those younger customers in particular are saving towards their first home, are saving towards a deposit, but they do consider that to be difficult, and only going to become more difficult, you would imagine, in a low rate environment. So about 30% of first-home buyers said that saving for a deposit was difficult for them, compared to 17% for other segments. So much more likely to be a pain point or something that customers are struggling with as they go through their first home application. I think does point to the need and perhaps the opportunity as well around helping customers when they're saving for their home, and rather than seeing it saving and home ownership as two different products or two different sets of needs. The other two stages that I think are interesting in terms of where customers are considering, or where first-time buyers are considering the process to be more difficult in comparison to other segments of the market. So you can see here there are sort of a number of other stages where first-time buyers are struggling a little bit. In particular, you can see that when they're in the property search, deciding on budget, determining loan size, there's a fairly sizable proportion of first-time buyers who are considering these stages to be difficult. But where the biggest gap is when they're choosing relevant mortgage features and when they're managing their repayments. So I think there's an element here of, as first-time buyers are going through this process for the first time, a lot of terminology that's been thrown at them is new to them. They don't necessarily have a very good understanding of what product features or even what product is the best suited for their needs. We see this coming through in the application pain points as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. But really needing that support around helping them to get into the right mortgage or the right product rather than just getting into their home. And managing repayments, I'll also come back to. I think this is another interesting point. We think of this as maybe being the easier part of the application journey. And actually, if you look at the proportion of customers who said they consider this to be very difficult, it is a lot lower compared to other stages of the journey. But first-home buyers are significantly more likely to struggle at this point compared to other segments of the market. Some of this is probably affordability. They obviously would have larger loans. They struggle saving for the deposit, as we've spoken about. But I think there's also opportunity here around supporting customers once they do take out their loan to better understand their loan and to better manage their loan as well. Also just wanted to show you where customers seek advice as they go through each stage of the application. And this is, again, looking at first-home buyers. So you can see here first-home buyers are largely seeking advice through most stages of the loan application. They're more likely to seek advice compared to other segments, as I said, given that they're going through this for the first time and have more questions and need more guidance. But the 2 points in time where they're least likely to be seeking advice are right at the beginning and right at the end of the loan application. So while they're saving for a deposit and while they're managing their repayment. So perhaps when we're talking about saving for a deposit, probably not a coincidence of where customers consider it to be most difficult is also where they're least likely to be reaching out for help. When we're talking about managing repayments, I suspect there's an element there of there's almost an assumption that customers don't need as much support once they get to that end point, or maybe don't know where to seek that support as well. So again, a couple of opportunities there around supporting first home buyers to a greater extent. And I'll talk about how that fits into loyalty as well in just a moment. Where do customers seek that support as they're going through the application journey? I wanted to point out the extent to which borrowers are using or utilizing their lender or their bank versus a broker. So the light blue line here is proportion of customers who used a bank as they went through each stage of the application journey. So you can see in particular, the bank is being used to a greater extent than brokers when we're talking about saving for a deposit. But as we go through that loan application journey, this does change a little bit. And what I'll actually call your attention to here is the dotted red line, which is the proportion of broker originated borrowers who are going to a broker at each stage of the application process. So once we get through to where it's more connected to the loan or the properties, are deciding on a budget, determining loan size, those customers are just much more likely to be doing that via a broker. They're less likely to be using a broker for things like saving for a deposit or at the property search stage, but they're actually pretty similar in terms of proportion of broker originated borrowers who are going to their broker at that stage compared to a overall market who are going to their bank. So as I said, there's opportunity there even amongst broker originated customers to be supporting them at that earlier stage, and potentially doing so would help to drive those customers through a direct channel rather than through the broker channel. And similarly, when we look at that end stage of the application journey, when we're looking at managing repayments, broker originated customers are much less likely to go to their broker for that point in the journey. And that is, I guess, where you would expect the lender to come in to a greater extent. This is probably where customers are looking to their lender for support to a greater extent. And we've spoken in a lot of our research and a lot of presentations, if you've been an RFI presentation in the past, broker originated customers do tend to be less loyal to their lender. They do tend to have worse application experiences and actually rate their recommendation or their NPS for their lender a lot lower than they do their broker. And I think this is probably the missing piece of the puzzle as customers come through that broker originated channel, as they get to the end of it, making sure they do have that contact with the lender around supporting them with managing their loan. Not something that they're looking for their broker to do, something they potentially looking to their lender to do to a greater extent, but also an opportunity to win back or win over that relationship so that the customer does have a relationship with the lender in addition to with their broker, which helps in terms of longer term retention as well. Also wanted to point out why customers use different channels. So why does a customer go to a broker versus their lender when they're going through that application journey? The number one reason why a customer will turn to a broker is they believe that a broker is going to offer them expert advice and guidance. That is not a reason why customers, or at least isn't one of the top reasons why customers go to their lender. They go to the lender because it's convenient. They'll go to the lender face to face because they can ask questions. And there's also a sense of being fast when they're going via the phone, and also a sense of being easy when they're going to those channels, which probably points to customers going to their lender because they already have an existing relationship with them, because they have some sort of sort of assumption of what they're going to provide, but not necessarily looking for or expecting to receive that expert advice and guidance. That's a value proposition brokers really continue to own, and one that you would think that customers should be thinking about when they're going to their lender as well. So a need here perhaps to reposition what role the lender plays, and in particular in those earlier stages of the application journey. So not just looking at the lender as a utility provider, but someone who's going to help you through that application journey. The other source that is really trusted is family and friends. That's where recommendations can really come in as well. And we know that a lot of customers will end up with a broker as a result of a recommendation. The other points I wanted to make around supporting first-home buyers as they go through the application journey is that customers who go, first-home buyers going through that application journey do tend to have more pain points in the application journey compared to other borrowers. And other borrowers, as I've said, they've been through this process before, so a subsequent borrower or refinancer are more likely to have, or have been through this process before, so more likely to have an understanding of what happens at each stage of the application. But if we're talking about a first-home buyer, potentially having expectations not set or not set correctly, and as a result, we see a number of pain points coming through. Some are fairly consistent actually across different segments. So understanding the application process and communication are two key pain points across all borrower types. Speed of the application is the other one that's a key pain point, and communication speed are really interconnected. So it's not just about how quickly the application is processed, but the communication that a customer gets as they're going through that journey, and again, the expectations that are set. But first-time buyers also consider it to be less likely to be satisfied with the ease of obtaining pre-approval and the ease of obtaining full approval. So viewing those really key parts of the application journey as more difficult compared to other borrower types. And again, here's the opportunity to really support these customers and to ease those pain points as they're going through that application journey. So there's a number of ways that lenders can support first-home buyers as they're going through the application journey. A lot of these, I think, do connect back to longer-term loyalty. So creating a really good customer experience up front, setting up a good relationship, all of that is going to help in terms of retention. But I also did want to touch on the topic of retention and loyalty more specifically, and what is it the borrowers are really looking for as they go through that loan journey, and post application in particular. So what we've been starting to look at is what do customers want in terms of loyalty rewards. When we're talking about a customer who's newer to the relationship, so a borrower who's taken out their loan in the last couple of years, what they're really looking for, and perhaps not that surprisingly, is a discounted interest rate. What does change as customers have a longer term relationship with the lender is what type of reward or how they want to be rewarded with or what they want to be rewarded for in terms of that discounted rate. So the first couple of years, I want a discounted rate for holding multiple products with my lender. Reward me for the depth of my relationship with the lender. There's also an extent to which customers want the ability to seek support. So allow me to speak to someone in branch, make sure I'm getting the most value, give me a home loan health check, so ensure that I feel like I have the right product fit to meet my needs. What we see is as customers have longer tenures, as they stay with the lender for a longer period of time, What they then shift to wanting or shift to valuing is an interest rate discount for being a loyal customer. So, and this will come up, I'm sure, multiple times throughout the conference, this idea of customers being aware of, or in some way at least aware of, front book, back book pricing, and the idea that a newer customer is getting a better deal than I am. What customers really want, and we've done a lot of work around this at RFI, is recognition for the loyalty that they are showing their lenders. So I'm loyal to you, show me something back, and in particular, show me something back in the way of pricing or in the way of a discount. Focusing in on that first-home buyer segment though, and what customers want, or what first-home buyers really want in the earlier stages of their home loan. So when they've had their loan for just 12 months, what is it that a first-home buyer is looking for compared to those other segments in the market? And the first thing I'll point out here, and despite what I was talking about on that previous slide and the importance of interest rate, discounted interest rates for holding multiple products with my lender is actually less important to a first-home buyer. That sort of depth of relationship maybe not there yet, but not something that first-home buyer is valuing to the same extent as those other segments. What they do value is support. So give me easy access to information on how to manage my loan, give me a home loan health check to make sure I'm getting the most value from my loan, help me to link and set up an offset account. What these first-home buyers, what these newer customers are really looking for is that support around managing their loan, and as we spoke about earlier on, also around managing their repayments. I think a lot of this comes back to customers who've been through this process perhaps feel like once they have the loan, their lender isn't as involved in the process, or for those who are broker originated, that's where their broker steps back. This is where there's an opportunity to really reach out to these customers to set a good customer relationship, to make sure that they are getting the most out of the product, that they understand the product that they have and how it meets their needs as well. We've also done a lot of work around home loan packages. If you look at a customer who ends up with a home loan package and the credit card that they have within that package, a lot of the time they don't understand the features of that product. They're not particularly satisfied with it. I think a lot of that goes back to this same idea of customers really needing more support, more proactive engagement at that initial, within that sort of initial 12 months after they take out the loan. And just wrapping this up, I wanted to also know what we see in terms of driving longer term loyalty. So the best way to look at this is really customers who are loyal, who have been loyal to their lender. Why have they stayed loyal? So why haven't they moved? There are a couple of points here around just general sort of apathy in the market. So I don't think it's worth changing. It's just easier to hold my products here than it is to hold them somewhere else. There's also perception around price. So I'm financially better off staying with this provider. But the number one reason why a borrower continues to hold their mortgage with their lender over a 3-year period, so after they've held their loan for 3 years, is trust. So everything I was saying around building that customer relationship, creating key touch points in the application journey, and once customers have settled as well, all of that helps to build trust with the lender. Trust, I think, also goes to the idea of my lender having my best interests at heart. So some of those sort of questions that borrowers have, or feelings that borrowers have around getting the best price versus a newer customer, I think some of that also potentially needs to be addressed in terms of building customer trust. But all of that, I think, really does get built through proactive customer engagement at those key points within the application journey and post-application journey as well. To leave you with a couple of key thoughts here in terms of what we've been through, we know that first-home buyers are growing in the market. That makes them an increasingly important segment for lenders to be thinking about. When we're thinking about where to start helping first-home buyers in terms of that customer journey, it really does start from saving for a deposit. This is the part of the journey where customers do feel like they struggle the most. And I think it does also point to the extent to which customers are really going to struggle with this in the future, given the low rate environment. So helping customers with things like PFM tools, with things like goal trackers, even with things like bonus interest rates, helping them to save up that initial deposit is really going to help in terms of building longer term trust and loyalty in the lender, and increase the chances, I would imagine, of that borrower then turning to their lender for advice as they start going through the process. There's also, I think, an opportunity when first-home buyers start to enter that application journey, especially where they're considering different loan features. Again, an area which they're more likely to consider to be difficult for first-home buyers. And we know as well, given some of the pain points that first-home buyers have when they go through that customer journey, just not really understanding some of the key differentiators in terms of different products, and maybe not feeling like they end up with the best product for their needs as well. That's also a space that brokers really own at the moment, that idea of brokers providing expert advice. So I think an opportunity or a need for lenders to reposition themselves as being the experts who can help customers, not just with saving for a deposit, but through to choosing the right loan as well. And then finally, how do you build that longer term relationship, and what can you do at the end of that application journey? So following settlement, being able to proactively contact borrowers, help them set up their loan, explain different features of the loan to them, give them reassurance that they have the right product for their needs, and also how some tips around managing their loan. All of that combined, I think, can help to build trust, and that helps to drive longer term customer relationships and keep customers loyal, in addition to things like making sure customers feel like they're getting the best rate, that they're getting a good deal based on them being loyal to their lender. So recognizing customer tenure as well. Thank you so much for dialing in. I hope you've enjoyed the conference so far. And if there are questions in the chat, I'm looking forward to answering them, but thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Josh and Kate. Last two speakers for the day. And that's a wrap for Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. But while you're still here, please stick around for a little bit of extra networking, and please go visit our sponsorship booths towards the end of the day. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow morning for another packed day of content. So have a good evening, and thank you very much.